Welcome back. So tomorrow, President Cyril Ramaphosa will take the oath of office and start his second term as president. And then, in the days after that, maybe the hours after that, we expect him to announce his new cabinet, which will include several people from parties in the new coalition government. But the new government also contains people who may have very different ideologies. For example, the ANC and the DA disagree strongly on the national health insurance system. The Patriotic Alliance and the ANC have completely different views on Gaza and Israel. That's before we even start on some of the other issues facing our society. Dr. Harlan Cloete is an expert on governance. He's from the University of the Free State's Administration and Management Department. Dr. Cloete, good afternoon to you and thanks for your time. Firstly, we now kind of know what the new government will look like. We have parties with very different views. Is that going to make it harder for them to work together? I mean, do you expect arguments all the time?
You see, good afternoon to you, Stephen, and good afternoon to your viewers. Any coalition, a coalition is like a marriage. You have to work to make it work. And you come into this marriage or this agreement with different views, but it's a voluntary process, and I think that is what it also is, voluntary. So any party, in any marriage, there will be disagreements. That's the way that we will settle these disagreements. And so it is not going to be smooth sailing. I don't think South Africans must be under any illusion that the coalition will fix all the problems automatically. It's going to be a tough, difficult road ahead to make this coalition work.
I mean, it seems to me that in the end, there are various things that will come up in the short term, but probably the biggest long-term issue that the ANC and the DA will disagree on in the end is race. And what's technically called race-based redress, but really in the end, black economic empowerment and affirmative action. Are differences over that something that can be negotiated?
I think they have set out, if I read correctly, the ANC statement of intent, it spells out that they will go for consensus, and they also use the word sufficient consensus. That I think all political parties agree is that we need strategies or plan on unemployment, inequality, and poverty, and how to get out of that. I think education you can put in the mix there as well as healthcare. So there's broad consensus about what is wrong. I think where parties differ is how do we get out of this mess? And so one hopes that in this broad coalition, we now can have the brightest minds from both sides to sit together, because if you're in government opposition politics, often the opposition may have very great ideas, but the governing party just simply dismisses that because it comes from the opposition. I think we have an opportunity here to reset and to have a very pragmatic approach as to what is wrong. We cannot have an economy that remains so exclusive. And so we need a more inclusive economy that brings the poor and the marginalized into the center.
I wonder if there may actually, Dr. Cloete, be a period almost of, I've been looking for the right word. I mean, maybe schizophrenia, maybe that's an unfortunate word. But in that we may find that some parts of a political party, some provincial leaders may say X, Y, and Z, while national leaders for a time say A, B, C. And what I'm trying to get to is, it might actually be quite a while before people get used to the idea. The lessons of opposition will go into government. People who've been in government for a long time will be used to making their own decisions in their own way. Government's a big institution. It'll have its own sort of culture in a way. All of those things will be quite a while before people know how this is going to pan out. Could we actually find a little bit of confusion almost?
I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be rough. I think it's only been 2 weeks. And so in other established democracies where they work with coalitions, like my colleagues tell me in the Netherlands, it can take up to 7 to 8 months to hammer out a coalition agreement. And so what we need, what the document also talks about, the national dialogue. I don't think that civil society must not be excluded from this. We cannot leave all the thinking to government alone. If we take the National Development Plan, talks about how we get out of our governance mess, is a multi-sectoral approach that involves the business community, academia, civil society, and government. And so we must be under no illusion, it's going to be rocky. There's going to be disagreements. But just like the Government of National Unity of 1994, this is a voluntary agreement. So if parties cannot find their way, if they've exhausted all avenues, the option also remains that they can play a very active role as a constructive, patriotic opposition. So it may be that one party are all rosy-eyed and all romantic getting into this government of national unity or coalition governance, who may decide 6 months from now that I do not want to be part of this anymore. I think that is normal. We have not reached coalition maturity yet. It's very, very, very early days if we look at, for example, our evidence that comes from local government. So this is the time to reset and reimagine about how do we govern. You know, it's not just government, but governance, society, civil society working with government and not leaving all the thinking to government.
How important is consultation in all of this? I mean, does every party now need to be consulted on, you know, almost every decision? And I mean, for years, it's been interesting. For years, many people in the media, the commentariat have complained that President Ramaphosa must be more decisive. Now, some of those same people are probably going to say, President Ramaphosa must consult more.
Yeah. I think that will be hammered out. If you look at the statement of intent, they will now, the parties will go into a Lekgotla to hammer out the strategic and come out with a clear program and a plan of action. I think one can get bogged down with race definitions or BE. Clearly, BE has not succeeded. If you look at affirmative action, employment equity, skills development. You know, I do research in these units or in these programs. And the biggest problem in South Africa is not policy, it's implementation. It's how we implement. And so hopefully after the Lekgotla and we've had the national dialogue, we will have a clearer sense of how do we then keep this government to account. You know, there's a part of me that think that maybe the ANC has rushed into this, but it is still early days. So the mechanisms about how this will work, that is still not clear. And I think over the coming week or so, once the president has announced his cabinet, we will get the budget, we will get the program of action. Then we will have a clearer idea about what are the priorities. But so surely poverty, unemployment must feature high on that, and local government, of course.
The big question, of course, so the president will be sworn in tomorrow. There'll be a speech. I think people are going to be watching. Where is John Steenhuisen sitting? Where is Gayton McKenzie sitting? Where is Velenkosini Chlabisa sitting? Are they sitting on the stage, which would be something new? Are they just sitting in the front row as sort of invited guests? And then after that comes the cabinet. How important is that? And I mean, for some people, they've been very explicit. The Patriotic Alliance has been very upfront. They go for whoever gives them the best deal. The Democratic Alliance maybe approaches these things publicly slightly differently, but will also have certain ministries they want. And in the past, working out who's going to be in cabinet for the ANC has been very difficult. I'm sure it's going to be even harder now.
I think this new arrangement may suit the president even more, you know, because now all of a sudden, you know, he has opposition in his own party as well. And so with this new arrangement, you know, he has to appease a broad group of stakeholders. But it could work to his advantage. You know, the DA prides itself that it is that they are experts in governance, clean governance, and they can do the right thing. So in the Western Cape, they will point to the Western Cape and to Midvaal municipalities, except where they govern, they say we've got a clean track record. And so we need fixing, we need ministers, we need leadership in this country, ethical and accountable leadership. And how does the president then balance efficiency and effectiveness? Because quite frankly, the ANC's record in government at times have been quite dismal, marked by institutional mismanagement. But if you look at the institution like SARS, they've managed to turn it around with good institutional leadership. So the cabinet will be the first indication of the seriousness of this new administration to get the work done. Because there have been ministers that have quite frankly just performed too badly. And so it's a fine balancing act. I think the president now has the opportunity to, his hands may be more loose than it was when it was only the ANC in government. And so he may have more room to maneuver to make sure that, because he's in his second term, this is his legacy now. So to make sure that the ministers deliver, and there's a clear government program of action that is not purely ANC, but is the broad consensus of South Africans about what should be done.
The fact that what we can see, particularly the agreement between the ANC and the DA, is now in the public domain. And they kind of both put it there, right? And they both put it there in the public domain, I think, because they both need to explain to their own supporters why they've done what they've done. Is that a good start? You and others have told us before how important it is to have public agreements. It looks like we're heading that way.
I think it's a wonderful start. It's a good start to say this is our intent. We don't know, the public don't know the how yet. I think the national dialogue that is planned will probably add a bit of flesh into that. So you don't just have consultation for the sake of consultation. I think this arrangement that we have here has been in the making for the last two years. I think that the DA may be more prepared than the ANC for this agreement, and so you have a 20% party. If you take the Pareto principle, 20-80 principle, if you listen to the interview of Harlan Cloete, for example, the other day, it's clear that the DA got what they wanted in terms of the agreement, and that is made public. Now we must allow the coalition to settle, to get on to the business of making sure it works, but it is not going to happen overnight. Governance is not as quickly as easy as switching on a light. You must give this thing time to settle and to let these differences and these contradictions and this ambiguity also spell itself out. That is part of this coalition. It's taking little steps to make sure that we find one another. So we are at the beginning stage. I think the next decade will be in a very exciting space because the electorate have clearly sent a strong message to parties. We no longer trust one party with a majority like we've seen in local government. We will see an increase in coalitions in 2026 with local government elections. So I think it's an interesting space also for the DA, because if you look at the protocols within cabinet, once a cabinet decision is made, it is not expected that a party go out and says, we were against that. The agreement allows for broad consensus. And so once you're in government, you get on with the business of governing, and there should be no contradiction. So that is going to be interesting as well to see how that plays itself out within the next couple of years. But this is our new normal. It is our new 1994. The NP walked away after 2 years. We hope that this coalition brings stability, so much needed, especially at local government.
Dr. Harlan Cloete, not the last time we'll talk to you, I think. Thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Dr. Cloete is an expert from the Administration and Management Department of the University of the Free State.